time. I mean, like, it's just like you walk outside and it's all the birds are singing and the sun is shining and it's got that je ne sais quoi. So you know those little random bits of trivia that you kind of retain for decades and decades just for no other apparent reason besides you know that is actually going to win a trivia game? So when I was in middle school, I remember my biology teacher telling us that your sense of smell is the most like memory-provoking sense that you have. And actually it's true. Like the other day I was in this hall and I smelled this cedar wood, and I don't know what it is. It's not like I've never smelled cedar before, but it was like this rush of a memory of my grandmother whose whole sewing room was built out of cedar wood. So it kind of happens with a lot of things. Like for me, I smelled like wet paint the other day and I was like, that smells like St. Leo's Catholic Church that I repainted, 5 years ago. But there are some senses inside you that are just so like embedded in who you are that it provokes this sense almost like of a presence. That's what I felt like when I smelled that cedar wood with my grandma. It was like a presence that she was around, or like a presence of that parish, mission day that we had. And I bet you that if you tried something like this, if you just jotted down what's something that you know provokes a memory in you, it probably has a certain smell to it. The reason I wanted to start with that is because actually today it's really cool what we're going to be talking about. It's the age-old question. How do I know if it's God talking or if it's my own voice talking? Because, I don't know about you guys, but I have a ton of thoughts that run through my head in a day. Some of them are really logical and well done, and some of them are just anybody's ball game, where they come from and where they're going. So for me, actually looking at this question, what's super cool is there is a certain presence when God is talking to you. And there's also a certain presence when you've got a voice of something that's not God. Do you ever feel like that? So there's two different things going on sometimes when you're looking at, okay, how do I know if God is the one talking to me and not just myself? Can we do an example? Because I think it would help. Okay. I remember being 11 years old, and we had just moved into my house in the country, and I remember climbing up to the top of a mountain and a hill and looking out at the mountains over my house. And I just felt this peace inside of me. And it wasn't anything spiritual necessarily. It was just that everything was quiet. And I was looking out at the mountains and I had this sense of everything's right in the world. And then out of nowhere, I hear this voice inside of me. And it was just simply, I love you. And then later on that day, I'm like, was that God? I was so young, actually, maybe some of you listeners that are little sisters of the girls, right? I was young when that happened. And I didn't know, was that God or was that just my brain talking? And then even later on that day, I was like, oh no, what if I'm making stuff up? What if that wasn't even God? What if I'm going crazy? Yeah. Okay, that little girl experience gives us a lot to work with. Can we rewind? And can we take a look at what does it mean to discern what God's voice looks like? Concept 1. God can speak through your thoughts. So it's actually a really valid question. Some of your thoughts are your own, kid, and you know what? You gotta own them. Most likely Jesus is not talking about your random thoughts of, if I opened a caramel popcorn business in the middle of a carnival, how much money would I make? Sometimes there are just thoughts that belong to you, right? But there are also thoughts that it kind of has this sense of was that God? And that's exactly what we're looking for. Here's the concept 2. God's voice has that je ne sais quoi kind of breathe it in Cologne. It's like if Jesus would walk into a room. I had a guy like this when I was in high school. I can't remember his name, but he would sit behind me for driver's ed. And he had the best cologne. I still remember it. And to this day, if I smell that cologne, whatever brand it is, I always think of him. Sitting behind me, those early mornings in the driver's ed class. So Jesus is kind of like that. He walks in to a thought, and he kind of has this flavor, this scent to him. And the scent feels like this. Anything that brings you this peace, a joy, feeling closer to God, feeling like God is closer to you, anything that makes you feel more open to God inside of you, that generally is God's voice. Now let's take a look at this. That moment in the mountains, when I was, 11 years old and I was looking out over the mountains, I felt a lot of those things. Like, I felt this sense of just a real simple peace and this sense of, I love you too. And that was it. It was so real, and I'd look back at this now and know for a fact, of course that's God, because I wanted God more afterwards, and God's whole desire is for me to be with him, right? Let's take a look at the moment later, though, when I'm in my kitchen and the thought pops into my head, what if I was just making that up? And it was exactly the opposite feel. It wasn't open, it wasn't peaceful, I wasn't breathing it in, it was that's super interesting. And if you watch, there's another type of presence, okay? It's like you have this really, cologne-drenched feel over here, and then there's another scent. And your soul has a memory detector just like your nose is, right? Like for that cedar wood, or for those little moments where you're like, I know what that smells like. There's another scent in the mix, and it's the enemy. And he can come in, and he can actually also try to knock on the door of your thoughts to make you afraid, to make you obsessive about thoughts. Does that ever happen to you before, where you're like, I don't know if I did that right, I don't know if I did that right. I step on a crack in the sidewalk that looks like a cross, and I'm up for days because I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm probably like the most awful Catholic ever. I mean, I know it sounds funny when I say it out loud, but like you're listening to me right now, and you know that that's happened to you, right? So like, there's a certain like sulfur to the voice of the enemy, and you have one. There's always two different movements that are vying for the ground of your heart. When the enemy speaks, he wants to keep you away from God, right? Right. So what he does is he slides in there, and your soul knows it because it makes you do this. It's just like this little flinch, Even if you can't tell in your mind that that's what's going on, he sounds like this. Was that really God? And he amps you up inside, right? And what does that make you feel? I have to do everything right. Like, what if I'm messing it up? I'll never be able to get to God. And he slowly moves you away from God, right? You're so in your thoughts that you don't even see God. That's a good tactic of the enemy. We're going to go into more of these in later videos that are going to be really cool. But what I wanted to get across in this particular video, you've got your own thoughts, right? Which is cool. Like, you're a fully functioning, halfway adult kind of human person. So of course you have your own thoughts. That's great. There are also like two influencers, in your world. You've got people over here. Well, one person is Jesus, and he is wanting to encourage you to things that come closer to God. And it's this sense, and your soul knows it because you want to breathe that in like a good cologne, right? You're like, that is good. So that's naturally your soul feels, I want to come closer to God. And then you have your enemy, and your soul also knows, even if your brain doesn't know, your soul is like, ew. Yep. Or it closes down the fear, right? I gotta figure it out. Or this sense sometimes of like an accusation that could come at you. Like, you're not doing it right. You know you're not doing it right. How do you know if it's God's voice or not? Really simple. You just look for the cologne. Yeah. Does this thought make me open up more to God? Or does this thought close me down? So for this week, what I wanted to see if we could do, okay? We have a little sheet that you can click on in the notes below. And in that sheet, we're just going to become aware this week of that quality of the voice of Jesus. So over here, that quality of anything that makes me feel more peaceful, closer to God, a joy for God, a desire for God. And we're literally just going to fill it in, write it down. We don't have to do anything with it because next week we're going to actually do some things with it. And then this week, let's also keep an eye out for where is the sulfur? Where do we got like the devil niggling in there and wanting me to feel afraid, feel accused, feel amped up inside, feel discouraged? So it could be a really fun moment because you know what? All of us have those mountain moments. Those moments where it's like springtime and you just breathe in the presence of God. And sometimes, it's so interesting. We don't believe them enough. But if you look at your life, and I would actually challenge you to do this, look behind you and see where you've been. And see how many moments has Jesus kind of popped up with those cologne type of moments. You know, it could be in a moment on a Christmas Eve in Mass. It could be when your baby brother was born and you felt so close to God. You just go through and kind of mine for what are those experiences of Jesus that I always kind of thought it might be God, but I never knew, and give it the Cologne test. Was that God? Probably. I am so happy we had this moment together. I can't wait for you to do this because I think it'll change your life, and let's see you next week, hopefully, on this same video series. Okay, God bless you. I hope this video made you feel more free. If you enjoyed, make sure you like and subscribe to be kept up to date with all of our new videos. Also, want to be a part of our mission? Donate below to support us in our calling to help young people hear God's voice and live their mission.